Spyro might be taking flight into the world of RPGs. I stumbled upon a job listing at Toys for Bob looking for a quest designer, a role typically not for 3D platformers. Could this mean a brand new kind of adventure for our favorite purple lad? And why do I think it has to do with RPGs? Let's dive into the evidence and speculate and see what this could mean for the future of Spyro. What's up guys, Canadian Guy here, and I am back with a brand new Spyro 4 video. It seemed like it's been ages since my last Spyro 4 video that was explaining how Spyro 4 is now in development. And it's where I was able to review a few key details about Spyro and his future with Toys for Bob. I'll be able to share that video later on. But there's been really nothing that I could share since that video. Mostly because there hasn't been much that I could talk about or really to talk about. We know that Toys for Bob recently brought Josh Nadelberg, who was the original art director for the Spyro Reignited trilogy, along with updating their website showing that they are creators of iconic and charming platforming games. But beyond that, there's really been not too many details that we could sniff out. That is until now. I was on LinkedIn recently checking on some details about something unrelated to this video when I saw an alert that Toys for Bob was actually looking for 2 new hires, so specifically 2 new job listings. The first one was for a QA lead. There were a couple of interesting details in the actual job posting, but there was nothing that stood out to me other than being familiar with both console and PC testing requirements, lightly implying we could see a potential port to PC for this game, which would make sense because they are partnered now with Microsoft, who is of course with Xbox. But even that is a weak connection and could absolutely mean nothing. However, the second job was actually quite a find. The job title was Quest Designer. Now, there are a lot of implications here that made me stay up till 1 a.m. doing research, so please keep following along because this takes a path that I didn't quite expect. The first thing that jumped out to me in the job listing is the very first line. Toys for Bob is looking for a quest designer to help us continue to charm and delight our audiences. This to me indicates that this is still very much likely for Spyro 4, as gritty RPGs aren't typically referred to as charming or delightful. And again, pair that with looking at the front page of their most recent update on their website, you can tell mostly are still being on a brain platformer-esque title, and we know from previous statements from Xbox that it is going to be a game in their wheelhouse. So to really spell it out, it's still for Spyro, don't worry. Moving down a bit more of the job listing, we get another nugget of info saying, using Unreal Engine 5, UE5, to implement, test, and deliver polished quest content. Meaning that this is a project that is in development in Unreal Engine 5. Again, Spyro Reignited, Crash Bandicoot 4, and Crash Team Rumble were all made in the Unreal Engine 4, so it makes sense the next iteration of Spyro would still be in Unreal Engine 5. Other things to note were find creative ways to mash up existing mechanics into fresh new experiences, and work with writers to weave narrative into gameplay. Remember that last one. But the biggest evidence of all, the biggest tell, the biggest loose thread, the biggest rabbit hole was actually back at the top. The actual title of the job, Quest Designer. Let me tell you about the quest that I went on that started at 10 p.m. and ended at 1 in the morning only because I had to go to bed. See, I thought Quest Designer, that will likely have to be with Spyro's minigames or something like that, and maybe there's a quest in there. But I decided to dig a little bit deeper into this. I went to see how many quest designer jobs were available, and just to see, like, is it as common as QA? Is it engineering? How common is this job that people are looking for? And I came to find out that there is not many at all. There are very few job openings or requirements for specifically a quest designer. I thought that was kind of odd. So I decided to go to Moby Games, which is a great resource if you want to look up any stats or any sort of credits for a game that comes out. and I looked up Spyro Reignited to see if there was a quest designer listed in that game. And it turns out there was no one. And yeah, okay, that makes complete sense. There's not really any sort of quests. And if so, it's all done through a remaster. You don't really need someone who's explicitly dealing with that. So I decided to take a look at Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, another title by Toys for Bob. Turns out, there was no one. Well, again, there's no surprise there. So I decided to check all of Toys for Bob's history of games, all the Skylander games, and everything before Crash and Spyro, and there was nothing. Okay, maybe a little bit odd. You know what? Let's go look at another game that was just on the front page for me to look at. Let's look at God of War Ragnarok. Let's go look at its credit wheel, and we can find that there was no quest designer. Okay, that's a bit odd. You would think that there would be a quest designer because of some of the quests that are in God of War Ragnarok. So I decided to just go straight to a big game that I know for a fact would have a quest designer. Baldur's Gate 3. It is literally a fantasy RPG with quests galore that intertwine with each other and react to each other differently. So surely this game has to have an entire team dedicated to quest designer. Only to find out, no, they don't have any quest designers. Okay, what's happening here? I finally decided to look at the granddaddy of them all. The biggest and longest game in this space that I could think of. World of Warcraft. There's literally tens of thousands of quests in that game. There has to be some form of a quest designer. And lo and behold, we finally found our first quest designers. As I continued to dig to find other games, I started to find that there were only a few games and franchises that actually use the term quest designer. In their credits, Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West were prominent with some of these people, along with other Blizzard IPs related to World of Warcraft, like Diablo. Then I found the job title in the credits for The Witcher, and Cyberpunk 2077, and then Skyrim. As I continued to piece things together, a pattern started to form right before my eyes, and let me tell you what I discovered. Every single game that had the job title of quest designer in their credits were all categorized as RPGs. Every single one. World of Warcraft, Horizon, all of Bethesda's games, like Starfield, Elder Scrolls, and Fallout, all of CD Projekt's Red games, like Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher adaptions, all of the most recent Ubisoft titles that are RPGs, like all the recent Assassin's Creed games, and more. Heck, with some process of elimination, I was able to determine that Playground Games, the company behind the new Fable, has a team of quest designers as well. And again, that is an RPG. The only game that I found that was not considered as an outright RPG was Dying Light 2. However, a quick Google search determined that many people felt that there were numerous elements of an RPG implemented into the game, and some sites even categorize this game as an action RPG. So let's play a game of chances. What is the likelihood that every single game that has a quest designer that I found is an RPG of some sort, but the only exception would be this new Spyro project? To me, that doesn't quite add up. Also, for curiosity's sake, I looked up both Skylanders and the Legend of Spyro games, and they are all classified as action games, along with the original Spyro the Dragon, and like I said, along with the Spyro Reignited trilogy. So, does this mean that we are about to get a crazy deep RPG that stars Spyro? Are we going to be putting the 3D platforming behind us? Well, not exactly. It doesn't confirm that, But why don't we speculate a little bit and see where Toys for Bob could take Spyro if there were some RPG elements injected into it? But before we do that, why don't we ask yet another question? What exactly does a quest designer do? I know that we have the job application from Toys for Bob that gives sort of a description, but do we have some more detail? Well, one of the quest designers from Guerrilla Games can actually give us a great answer. Quote, broadly speaking, quest designers work very closely with the narrative team to craft experiences that are both narratively and mechanically satisfying. This means pitching and workshopping ideas, refining the gameplay beats in tandem with narrative, building out the quest in-game, which includes tasks like creating combat encounters and setting up the sequence networks for our NPC conversations, then continuing to polish the quest for the duration of development. Although we probably work most closely with the narrative team, as questies we need to communicate with almost every other department in order to do our job. While of course the responsibilities of a quest designer could vary from company to company, Toys for Bob's description of the job that we read earlier sounds very similar, if not the same as what was described here. We also know that in later titles, Spyro has numerous side missions and mini-games, but I don't think that's what the quest designer is going to be making. At least not that small of scale, especially since no Spyro title ever has had a quest designer credited in the past. I don't think we're going to get a game that has exclusive side missions like, "Hey Spyro, Bingus Bungus over here stole my onions. Can you get them back for me?" These random minigames also were isolated and random and didn't really add at all to the narrative. It was just an excuse to put another collectible. Spyro could have skipped saving the baby turtles and it really wouldn't have affected Ripto one bit.
Come on, guys, get out of here.
Where are the turtles? Where are they?
But this time, I think the side missions are going to be much deeper and tie more into the narrative of Spyro, requiring a dedicated team member or members to make sure that the narrative and gameplay match up with these so-called quests, which leads to my next point. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time was very much made with the idea of, what if we just pivot from what the originals did and continue where they left off, but in a modern setting? But I think Spyro 4, or whatever it's going to be called, is going to go much deeper. I think Toys for Bob wants to add and expand from what made Spyro such an iconic game. So I think the narrative of the next Spyro will be more consistent and deeper, and I think a lot more thought is going to go behind the story. I think as well the scale of the game is going to be much bigger than we might have initially anticipated, as games with elements from RPGs are typically bigger in scale. This of course leads me to think of numerous questions, numerous situations, and of course concerns. If this job is related to adding more RPG elements to the Spyro universe, what could we see? Bigger levels? Dialogue options? Equipment and upgrades? Other playable characters? A brand new universe? And how can Toys for Bob strike a balance between making the game different, but not so different that fans can't recognize it? There are so many hypothetical questions, and I encourage you to subscribe to stay tuned for all your Spyro 4 news and Spyro 4 needs in general. Also, if you're lost about the concept of Spyro 4 existing in the first place, then I recommend you check out this video right here. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye!